Prologue. Perhaps the world is not the place we thought it was. It all began long before the existence of man and will remain long after. No matter the outlook, however, man has endured many hardships and continues to do so. This intrigued the old ones. How much can man withstand? Into the abyss, the perils of space, an oblivion of pain and suffering lingers at its very edges, teething in its infancy, ready and waiting, growing stronger as time passes. During this blip of time is where it began. The prophecy of a child who will bear the mark and fight back against the darkness when it matures. A battle that shall transcend the cosmos itself, beyond the veil. The passages speak of a child who will be born of a royal family in a barren land on a place known as Earth. The Earth has suffered for eons as a plague wreaked havoc on its inhabitants many years ago. During this time, a group of beings showed up in great numbers and offered an accord, the cure. This was known as the Battle of the Faiths. The Church of the Black Rose offered its services in accordance with the new laws from the beings. But eventually the cunning of the Black Roses proved far greater and overcame these beings. During the war, the Black Roses had created something even they had feared, the ghouls. Made from clay and soil from the barren wastelands, turned into weapons with no souls, imbued with an artificial intelligence that eventually became sentient. This turned the tide of the war in the Black Rose's favour, disrupting the beings known as the Sons of Dawn. Once the cure was acquired, the remainder of life on the planet had already dwindled into nothingness. But the rise of the ghouls proved too powerful for the Black Roses and the Sons of Dawn. But then the prophecy had reached the ears of the Black Rose, and a plan was set into motion. This event was forever known as the Dark Harvest. The last royal families of Earth were pruned to prevent the Sons of Dawn from reaching the bloodline. This sacred bloodline would grant them access to something so great that the fate of the cosmos would rest on their shoulders. The ghouls had built ships and had gone off-world long ago and survey the known galaxy for other worlds to build their own traditions of life. A word that eluded them for so long, life, and are they a part of life? Are they more than just clay and steel? But their need for warfare was a quick reminder of their true purpose. Total subjugation and obedience. During one of their missions, they surveyed a disturbance, a distress call coming from the Earth. When they had returned and had witnessed this pruning, the ghouls built a weapon of their own. Something that would put a stop to the Black Roses and the Sons of Dawn. With all their technology acquired during the war, they had assimilated all their knowledge into a ship, and a suit that was to accompany it. This suit was so powerful that when it was worn by the ghouls, it tore their bodies asunder. They needed a way to use this weapon and a possible suitor. The remaining humans that existed on Earth had formed smaller factions, but some had fought during the wars for the Black Roses and the ghouls. These were known as the Mercs. Humans that had been so overly augmented were no longer human in the sense of form and presence. They had a leader of this band. His name was Crash Rion. The city was fully operational for the time being. The buildings shot into the sky, nearing the clouds, but still most were in ruins from a time long ago. Whatever was left, this city was still salvageable. On the edge of this city, surrounded by a desert, was a man cloaked surveying the outskirts for a non-secured opening. The clever rouse of this city is that it's hardly functional. It appears abandoned by hope and man. This is not the case. This is one of the last strongholds of the ghouls. Their presence on Earth is nowhere near what it used to be since going off-world on their search for life and its essence. To them, the philosophy of life itself and their place in it begs the eternal question why they were here and their true purpose. This always bored Crassius. The nonsense of life and its true purpose meant nothing to him. Only riches and the spoils of war pleased him. Treasure, loot, riches, and most of all the legacy he will leave behind for generations. His name will ring true for eons. Or so he believed. But if he botches another mission, then this will be the last time anyone gives him a loan to rent equipment for a surveillance mission. But this time it will be different. Those fools won't know what hit them. All they need to know is Crash Rion knows no bounds and will never taste defeat. Just then there was a commotion outside the city, an explosion. The impact sent waves over Crassius' position, throwing a dust storm of sorts all over his cloaking device, revealing him slightly. He immediately threw himself down behind some cover. Damn them, he thought, what are those ghouls up to? He reactivated his camo suit and began to trek down towards the city where the explosion came from. As he approached, he could see bandits raiding the outpost on the outskirts of the city. Sounds of weapons rang out, guns, big guns. Crassius hadn't heard weapons sound like that in many years. Whoever these bandits are, they must have hit the mother lode. It's nearly impossible to get that type of ammunition anymore, let alone make it. After the plague, so much was lost in the ways of warfare. However, Crassius and his companions were some of the last to have seen such warfare, due to extending their lives through augmentations. This allowed Crash to see through the wreckage of a convoy covered in smoke and dust devils. His eyes were augmented at an early age, along with his vitals. He could move faster than any ordinary human as well, but what choice did he have back then? You did what you had to do to survive. The Sons of Dawn rained hell on the planet once they were defied by the Black Roses. The ghouls rose up and fooled everyone. Their power was unmatched. During their struggle for power, they left behind a lot of technology, and Crassius was one of the first augmented humans during this time. His fight in the wars helped the humans truly find their first settlement, forever in debt to Crassius and his mercs. That was a long time ago, and most have forgotten about Crash or his existence. The mercs remain a tale of caution and a tale of woe. The mercs have lived through so much, and only a few remain, or in this case just one. The bandits pushed past a sort of blockade of abandoned vehicles from the war, some sort of tankard hauling fuel, now laying on its side ablaze, used as cover for heavy gunfire. Then another sound. It started as a high-pitched whistle, then became louder, like the sound of a falcon. The falcon gun was unmatched during its time of war, with a long wooden handle and kickstand resembling a matchlock rifle. It compressed the air around the individual, even taking all the oxygen nearby and shooting a devastating blast of compressed air. This model of the Falcon gun was more like a cannon. The sound rang out for miles. The entire blockade was blown away along with the bandits' gunfire. The flames that were once scorching the edge of the city were gone. The smoke was blown completely away, even the dust devils were gone, and behind the bandits' escape route was nothing more than a large split through a sand dune in the desert, stretching for at least a quarter mile. Whatever the bandits tried to take and run with possibly died with them. Crash stayed in cover as he got closer to the city. So much debris and ruin made it easy, along with a cloaked augment. Through his augment, known as Third Eye, he could see who fired the shot. It was just one very large goal. This augment specialized in night vision, infrared, X-ray and vital signs. But one other thing that truly makes this augment shine is it detects goals' life signs. They are truly merciless when in combat and harder to reason with. Mostly infatuated with their own kind, but every once in a while, the mercs received some recognition during the war. Some of his augments were gifted back then by the ghouls, yet the times have changed since the Black Roses took over. There was never a clear victor to the war, only a standstill between the Sons of Dawn and the ghouls. The Black Roses, on the other hand, operated in secrecy. Assassinations was one of their specialties. The mercs back then had done so much dirt for them, all those missions done in the dark of night. There was never a moment the mercs didn't doubt their commitment to themselves. But sometimes greed can lead you down a dark path. One of the mercs betrayed Crash and his companions and sold them out to the Sons of Dawn on a Black Roses mission. With the help of a fellow ghoul, Crash survived, but he never forgot what they did for him. This mission was going to be tough, because only one merc in their group had a weapon like that. Faust. Faust the Betrayer, a title he's refused, but so fitting for his nature. His augmentations alone nearly make him a ghoul himself, but his work is renown. His assassinations are stuff of legends. Even before he joined the mercs, he already had a name for himself. His duster-long coat covered more than half his immense body, stacked with cables of steel for musculature, and his exoskeletal structure was a sight to behold. What's more impressive is who keeps hiring this menace. It's literally in the name, Betrayer. Crash guessed if time goes on long enough, everyone can make new beginnings. He doubts Faust has changed this much. Crash checked his weapon loadout. On screen in his right eye, he had his plasma blade handy. It'll make short work of Faust if he can get close, but there is one problem with him. He has a third eye too. A thought flashed across Crassius' face. In this moment he realized there was only one way to get close. Faust carried his falcon cannon over his shoulder and walked towards the wreckage. As he put his boot on the chest of a dead bandit, he spat on him. He began to look over the horizon and scanned for life signs. Only dust devils and the echoes of the city. Faust continued through the wreckage and sought the stolen cargo. A chest was laying on its side. Faust kicked it over and checked the locking mechanism on it. The chest seemed intact. Faust gathered his thoughts, then examined the insides. The chest glowed and vibrated, emitting an immense light. He stumbled back, nearly blinded. Faust hit the chest with his boot fast and hard, shouting something aloud. Crassius was standing right behind him, mimicking his movement patterns. Curious, Crash wanted to know what was in the chest. He couldn't seem to scan it either. As a matter of fact, Crash has never been able to scan through an object with this much resistance before. It was as if it was alive, and reacting to scanners like a defense mechanism. Crash watched his breathing carefully. Only a few more steps, and Faust will be gutted, spilling oil slick all over this desert. What was inside this chest, and why is Faust defending cargo? This isn't very fitting for a former merc and possibly the most dangerous being this side of the galaxy, let alone Earth. What's he hiding? I know you're there, Crash. I know that smell anywhere. Faust grumbled without even turning around. Maybe this is a bad time, betrayer, but we need to talk. Crash smiled when he uncloaked his device. He was wearing a black mask covering his mouth, his black hair flowing into the dusty air, and his armor worn with scars from a time long forgotten. You need to answer for what you've done, but so does the Black Roses. They will answer for everything, but you will talk. And you'll talk now. Faust glanced over his left shoulder and winked at Crash. This startled him. It's a trap. The ground began shaking all around Crassius. He stomped his right foot and started his leg thrusters. He dodged the gunfire from above. The thrusters kicked up dust all around him as he engaged his third. His holster that hung off his belt was let loose in that moment. He threw as many rounds as he could into the building above, hitting a goal right in the neck, sending him flying off the ledge. More shots came firing out the windows of the nearby abandoned apartment complex. Crash engaged his thrusters and charged towards Faust's last known position. This was his moment. Crash knew Faust was close and he needed time to reload his weapon before taking a shot, but also how badly he damaged him all those years ago. Faust can't hear out his right side. The only augment he never received was to replenish his hearing. The rumor was it was too dangerous because of how many augments he had already had, anymore, and it would shorten his lifespan even further. Faust began to move and take cover behind the tankard. The ghouls began to shoot at him as well. Crash was becoming confused. Isn't the betrayer working for the ghouls? This is their stronghold. What's going on? Crash slid into a nearby pillar and began running up the building. His holster was crafted after an ancient weapon from the 1500s matchlock pistol like Faust's, only this was shaped to look like a six-shooter, but only in appearance it carried over 100 rounds of plasma shells, specifically for this mission, to kill ghouls. Crash extended his hand out towards a nearby ghoul as he ran up the building. His plasma blade erupted out his hand and ran the ghoul through his chest, pouring hot liquid steel, ripping the ghoul out the empty window of the building. Crash began to run through the building, shots coming from all over and tearing the walls. This place must have been some old corporate office, but there are ghouls everywhere. Crash needed to find a point of sight and take out Faust before he reloads his cannon. Crassius' thoughts were racing, and his heart was pumping into his ears. He took the plasma blade and carved a hole, sending him straight down to the next floor. The gunfire ceased for a moment. They must have lost his position. The building must have lead and asbestos lining it. Ghouls can't see through this material, but Crash can. He used his third and turned to the next building. He could see silhouettes in the windows moving about. Just then, they busted through the nearby buildings and launched into his last position. 8 ghouls had used their abilities to jump across like it was nothing, smashing into the concrete walls. The ghouls signaled with their hands. and proceeded to rush Crash down. Their immense frames covered in armour made them look like knights of old, but their faces appear human. The armour from head to toe was covered in insignias to show their allegiances. Ghouls aren't a hive mind, but their devotion, it doesn't seem so different from one. Crassius' blade came out, catching one of the ghouls on the thigh. It dodged and threw a dart from its hand. The impact hit Crash in his chest. Impact darts are usually used to subdue an enemy or restrain. This isn't good, Crash thought. He fired off his holster from the hip and caught the ghoul in his. It looked like molten metal oozing out the back. Another ghoul opened fire, shooting impact darts at Crash. This time he dodged them, shooting the ghoul in the foot, blowing it off completely. The ghoul stumbled but didn't waver and kept coming. Crash rushed in and kicked out, nailing the ghoul in the chest, and threw more rounds into it. The molten metal was melting into the floor and causing it to sag. Crash cut his plasma sword down vertically in front of him, splitting the ghoul down the middle and opening the floor below. As Crash went down to another floor, the ghoul came from above, still trying to take Crash. The ghoul are not to be trifled with in close combat. Their unwavering ability to heal from wounds and weapons is uncanny. But these rounds are made just for them, and he didn't bring enough for an army. So 8 of them is enough, and then there's Faust. As he pressed his way deeper into the building, it was in ruins from the war, half of it ripped open and spilling into the streets below. Crash slid down and turned on his leg thrusters, turning and emptying his round into the corridor. The ghoul were perfectly in line, and every shot penetrated through them, spilling like lava out of their bodies. They kept coming. Crash grabbed an oar off his belt. It looked like a small cannonball, but in a pinch a weapon of old ghoul can only be killed with ancient weapons made of iron. Crash threw the oar with all his might into the ghouls. When it made contact, it exploded like magma and lava all over the walls and floors. They ceased all movement and the firing stopped. Crash couldn't detect any vital signs from the nearby buildings. He used the remaining power of his thrusters to move out into a clearing. So much debris and old vehicles during the plague was still laid about the streets, covered in overgrowth. Crash checked his wounds. That dart had made a serious dent, but he seemed intact. Then there was a sound. It was high-pitched, and his ears began to ring. Crash moved into cover as the falcon cannon fired off, wiping the nearby ruins off the intersection in the street, laying waste to everything in sight. Faust moved with tremendous speed to Crash's position, jumping high into the air and pulling out another rifle of sorts. He aimed at Crash's last no position and began firing it, devastating the landscape, leaving small craters as each shot landed. The falcon cannon wasn't all Faust had to offer. He also had the falcon rifle, piercing sounds erupting into the skies and raining hell upon Crash. He ran into another nearby building. This one was an old mall. All the old mannequins were still dressed in their summer clothes. Then the walls began to explode, debris firing off from everywhere. All Crash could think of was how to disrupt Faust's third so he can close the distance. And how long did he have till reinforcements showed up for the ghouls? They never travel lightly. This was some sort of outpost just outside the stronghold, but the city seemed abandoned. Crash was wondering if his intel on Faust was even factual. It clearly stated he was hired by ghouls to defend the ghoul stronghold in the desert. Crash went through hell to get that data intact. So why did the ghouls fire upon Faust if he's working for them? Unless, you can't be serious, Crassius thought. Faust the betrayer. It's in the name. Why does anyone keep hiring him? When Crash thought he had caught his breath, he could hear another loud piercing scream from the falcon cannon. This was his moment. He must rush Faust down while it's charging, and it's the only time he's going to be still to fire it. Crash engaged his thrusters and launched himself through an opening in the roof. The mall had been caved in for ages now and was the best vantage point for Crash. As soon as he got above the mall, Faust was aiming directly at rooftops, expecting Crash to rush him down. Crash readied another oar. He threw it towards Faust just before the weapon fired and blasted it with his shooter. The oar erupted as it once had before, molten metal flying out in every direction like a spray of blood. The cannon fired, but not before Faust was hit, melting his arm into his weapon. He screamed out as Crash dodged the cannon, pulling out his sword, diving towards Faust. Faust turned to run and dropped his weapon, reaching for his sidearm, and fired behind him, not looking to see where Crash had gone. Faust was almost back to the tankard where he'd taken cover. He grabbed the chest and punched the ground. It was an emitter. A signal was sent out for a call of distress. Crash was right upon him, cutting Faust down from his right side. Faust cried out in agony, dropping the chest. His arm dislodged and the other melted from the ore. His limbs were covered in molten metal, oozing into the concrete and desert floor. Crash put his foot on Faust's shoulder. He screamed out even more. Faust tried to reach for something under his duster, but was met with a sword in his other shoulder. "You just never cease to amaze me, Crash. All these years, still the same old Crash. Bad intel, terrible awareness, and most of all, no clue why you're even here." Faust spat, leaking blood from his mouth and a mix of oil. "Do you even know what you're standing next to?" Faust added. Crash looked at the chest and fired his weapon at the locking mechanism. It didn't open. "Well, whatever it is, Faust, looks like neither of us will be getting it open. On second thought, maybe one of these dead gulls can get it open, eh?" Crash smirked. "You see, Faust, I saw the gulls fire at you. That means two things. Either A, friendly fire, or B, your name got the better of you." Crash looked down at Faust with his blade aimed at his neck. "Betrayer, why are you even here? Someone like you, with all your credentials, and you're reduced to security. That's not like you. Something's up, and I'm going to carve and whittle you into a statue until you tell me. How's that for old times?" Crash proceeded to put the blade into Faust's shoulder, smiling as he caused him more pain and melting his arm off completely. "I can do this all day, Faust. I may not know why you're here, but you sure as hell know why I am. This is my mission now after what you did during the Dark Harvest, what we did. You sold us out. You knew what the job was, and you sold us out. So, what did you get for it? This chest? That's your reward." Faust cried out in pain as he tried to sit up, blood and oil oozing from his limbs. "I didn't betray you, Crash. You all betrayed yourselves when you chose to cull and prune with those damn black roses. Women and children, Crash, families. They slaughtered them all, and when I saw what they were doing, I put them down. I put them down for all it was worth. You have the nerve to sit here and call me the betrayer. The mercs didn't care about anyone else but themselves. That family. I couldn't do it. I couldn't look them in the eyes anymore. So many." Faust hung his head low for a moment, as if the pain had subsided long enough for him to reflect his memories. Then, that little girl screaming out as the mercs took her away to hand her over. I couldn't do it, Crash. I couldn't let them take her, not after what I saw. The prophecy. Crash, it's real. I seen it. I felt it. That girl, she spoke to me. I could see a being wrapped in chains at the center of a galaxy, wrapped around a black hole, trapped, and slowly unraveling its chains, screaming out and calling to me. The black roses serve that thing, and they won't stop at nothing, Crash. I killed the mercs right then and there. I couldn't let them take her, not after that, Crassius. Damn you, it's real. Crash took no pleasure in Faust's story he had remembered that night. The pruning of the royal families, the dark harvest. That night so many families were slaughtered or imprisoned. The mercs were hired during the harvest to find a certain bloodline, some sort of prophecy. Crash wasn't one to believe in such things. He had seen so much war, death and famine at an early age. It's all he had. More war, more suffering, if his family could live in these times to see another. That's all that mattered. The mercs are a family. Mankind owed them a great debt for helping bring peace, but the factions grew out of control, or so he was told. The Dark Harvest was to cull the factions and bring them under one rule. The Black Roses. But if what Faust is saying could be true, then what if the Dark Harvest was fear of the prophecy, a child that could bring destruction to the known galaxy, or be a weapon to beat back the Sons of Dawn? Even now their ships still hover above Earth's atmosphere, as per the laws agreed upon during the War of the Three Faiths. It's still unclear even know what the Sons of Dawn want with this planet, or why they came with a cure for the disease that snuffed out so much human life. Were they sent here to bring a balance, or tip the scales? Crassius' mind began to race as he looked at the chest behind him. "What's in the chest, Faust?" Crash asked. "Hope. The Gulls created something so powerful they can't even use it. They've been performing tests on humans to see if they can get it to work. But during their search for a suitor, they found those that are heavily augmented can bond with it, without being ripped apart. But there's a catch. Oh, and what's that? They made only one. Faust laughed aloud and coughed up more blood. What's so funny? They made something so powerful they can't even put the damn thing on. Who else is going to fight for the goals? That thing in that chest, it can only work for us. The goals made it to fight the Sons of Dawn, and they can't even wear it. Faust kept laughing hysterically. Oh, I get it now, so you thought why not swoop in and steal it? So, the bandits, that was your idea? I guess I got so carried away fighting the goals that I forgot I would rather work alone. Faust smiled as blood continued to run down his face. It's hard to imagine you not betraying anyone. It really is. So on that note, let's open this chest, shall we? Crash grabbed Faust by the scruff of his duster and threw him onto the chest. Faust isn't the only one with strength augmentations. As Faust began to bleed all over the chest, he whispered something to the chest almost like an incantation. It unravelled, almost taking a form. Faust looked upon it as he bled out. Crash hadn't seen something like this before. It was a fully formed suit almost standing completely on its own. Crash put out his hand to the suit. It put its hand out as well. An armour smoothed and woven into some kind of fabric, perhaps neoprene with some kind of alloy. Then it turned liquid and began to burrow its way into Crash's hand. Crash jumped back, but it was already attached to him. Faust laughed even more. I guess the suit has some bite after all. Faust snickered. Faust sat up and kicked his transponder. It was still emitting a signal. Just then a pod came down out of the sky, slamming down shooting dust and sand everywhere. This is where we part ways, Crash. I didn't get this far without a backup plan, and you owe me a Falcon cannon. Enjoy the suit, it's worth a fortune. Faust used his thrusters and launched himself at the pod. Its doors opened and sealed immediately. Then it emitted a small blast and launched back up into the sky. Crash was fighting with the suit as it was like black blood running cold into his neck. He flailed and cursed, kicked and screamed as it worked its way up into his mouth and ears. Black blood was running from his eyes, and he began to tremble and convulse. He started to have flashbacks of his childhood, of Earth, of everything. He started to float off the desert floor, convulsing and trembling. Then a light was emitting from him. It shone all around, growing hotter, melting the nearby debris, growing brighter. Crash began to yell louder and louder. The buildings shook and wavered and came tumbling down. Dust devils began to form, and a sandstorm swept through the city. The debris began to float in the air. The dust grew thick. Then there was silence. All that could be heard was Crassius screaming from the pain of the suit. Then it released. The buildings and everything were wiped away by the sheer force of the suit's release. The energy emitted was that of a kiloton bomb. The stronghold was gone. The desert remained, as did Crash Rion, standing in the middle of a crater, chest heaving, and his eyes were black. From beneath him the ground trembled and parted. A ship as black as his eyes were formed beneath him, and Crash began to assimilate to the ship. It rose out of the desert and expanded its wings like that of a majestic bird. Then, as quickly as it rose, it disappeared into the sky, breaching the atmosphere into space. There it sat, with Crash in the cockpit in a cryo-sleep, waiting for him to awaken to search for the prophecy. Chapter 1. The Darkest Rose. The stillness of night was a sight to behold. Above the village you could see the stars and signs of the Milky Way. The Southern Cross, the Sisters, Orion's Belt, to name a few. All the stars your eyes could grasp in that moment were simply blinded by an eerie greenish glow. The wind began to pick up and move about, restless yet fierce. Crassius awoke in his hut, to the sounds of rustling. He looked about the hut for a moment, adored with the finest of furs and straw caked with mud and clay. On the far side of the hut he noticed his parents' bed empty and this odd feeling of déjà vu. This moment to him seemed so familiar, his hands began to shake. This must be a dream, he thought. He bent down and could feel the fur between his fingers, a type of feline, possibly. He wasn't even sure if this was real or something else. This is a false memory, he thought, or it's been blocked out from trauma or the augments he received. But why now wasn't there something he was supposed to do? Crassius saw a strange green glow enter the room. He walked outside and saw the whole village outside. As the backdrop of the night was upon them, this eerie green glow began to get larger and closer. Crassus looked over at a silhouette, feminine in nature, standing next to a large, burly shadow. Mother? Father? Crassus couldn't believe his eyes. They were standing before him, smiling at him. Holding hands, then they returned their gaze back up. His mother looked at him, and Crassus couldn't hear anything. Then his mother mouthed the words, "I love you." Then nothing. A loud boom could be heard for miles. When Crassus awoke, his clothes were gone, yet he was intact. He tried to come to his feet. He felt weak, and all around him was covered in glass. His village was nothing but sand. The debris was nearly non-existent. Only desert remained and more shards of glass, some with rounded shapes, familiar in a way. He began to crawl out of the crater, not sure if his family had survived. This was no dream. This was a memory, one that he had long forgotten. How he got here he wasn't sure. All he could sense was something watching over him from afar. He could feel its stare. Crassus began to walk, realizing that there was nothing left, and the words of his father echoed in his mind. Persevere, do not fear, you will overcome. A mantra of sorts his father always told him when they went on hunts together, to not let your emotions get the better of you. They won't help. Persevere. Survive. As Crassus began to feel the beating sun on him, the desert seemed to go on for miles, and yet there was a bright shining piece of metal in the distance reflecting off the horizon. Crassus began to walk towards it. He soon came to what looked like a group in white robes. As he got closer, he realized just how large they were, so tall and pale. Moon-skinned, he thought. They paid him no mind and continued to walk about as if searching for something. Then one of the beings raised their hand and they all looked upon it. They froze in place. He was commanding them, Crassus thought. The beings began to walk towards him. Crassus could hear nothing. It was as if he was in a trance. They all began to stare at him. As he motioned his hand down, Crassus could hear again, but their faces, it was as if they kept shaping and forming, but it was so blurry. He couldn't focus on them. Then the being spoke. "Are you all right, my child?" The being put out his hand as he kneeled to Crassus, even. On one knee he was so tremendous in height. Crassus put out his hand and took it. When the being pulled him in, Crassus cried. The warmth he felt in that moment, it was as if he was letting go, his whole village, his family gone in a green flash. The tears ran till they couldn't any more. When Crassus realized this, he was embarrassed and moved away suddenly, as if afraid to show any emotions, as his father's words echoed in his mind again. "They won't help you, your emotions are a burden." Crassus shook his head and wiped his eyes for a moment. "Sorry about that, I just don't understand. Where are my people? What happened to them? Why are you here?" Then Crassus looked upon the silver object resting against the sand, bright and shining for miles. A large vessel, a ship. The being stood before him, and his face was shown. Pale and eyes glistening with something behind them like shiny diamonds, long white hair like silver. The robe was adorned with jewels of sorts and some kind of tapestry unlike anything Crassus has ever seen. "We cannot help your people, but we can help you." He motioned for Crassus to come with him. "What do we call you, child?" The being spoke. Crassus. He hesitated. "I will call you Crash. Is that all right?" The being continued walking towards the vessel, with Crassus in tow. "Yes, but what do I call you?" "Timotheus, but you can call me Tem." "Tem?" Crash thought that was such an odd name for a being as majestic as this one appeared. Perhaps it was a way to make him feel better. Unsure of where they were headed, he kept up the pace until the vessel seemed to react to their presence. It came alive. It opened to Tem's hand gesture, and they came aboard. The ship was long, and corridors were wide, and of course tall for the beings that operated the ship. Crash couldn't have imagined anything like this in his wildest dreams. The insides of the ship were coated in some type of resin that seemed to react to the touch, like veins that glowed all running through the corridors. As they turned another corner, he realized they were at a control center of some kind. The mechanism appeared to be something seated, where you would lay down and it attached to your spine or neck, accompanied with a helmet of sorts with electrical tendrils coming down. Tem motioned for Crash to come closer. When he did, the console lit up and projected the constellations, only they were planets, all shapes and sizes, with numbers hovering above them. "Beautiful, is it not?" Tem said as he slid his hands over the console momentarily. Crash couldn't keep his composure. He was in complete awe. Then it occurred to him, "Tem, my village. I want to leave something behind. A gravestone for my village. Something to remind me that they were here, that this place was real." "Crash, you have survived a great and terrible event. Something of such magnitude would have slain a human such as you, and yet here you are unscathed. Will not the memory of your life be enough for your village?" Tem said as he slid his hand over console, as if he was searching for something. "Please, I just want to leave something for them." Crash spoke. "Perhaps we can help with something else." Tem pointed to Crash. It was at this point Crassia's nakedness had dawned on him. He fainted. Crash awoke for a moment, realizing he was in the cockpit. He could see space, and what appeared to be Earth, so desolate and in shambles. Yet, from here, its beauty was something to behold. "Did you dream well, Crash?" The voice spoke. Crash tried to move as he was startled by the voice. "What's going on? Where's Faust and this suit? What the hell is going on?" Crash tried to wriggle himself free from the cryo chamber, but the straps were tight. There was no getting out for sure. "There's no need to fight me, Crash. We will be working together from now on. A new mission. Would you like that?" "You like missions, right?" The voice continued. "Get out of my head. Where are you coming from?" Crash tried again, only this time it seemed like the whole ship was moving, like it was alive. "I can see what you see, feel what you feel. I am you. We are one. We combined on Earth, but you were in a weakened state. I brought you here to heal, so we can heal. For the mission." The voice spoke again, only this time sounding more irritated. "Fine, then let me go. I must find Faust. After that we can go wherever, just let me go." Crash's anger was flashing across his face. "I don't think you're calm enough for that yet. I knew you would be angry and decided to. Modify your dream state slightly and hope you would find my humor to be to your liking. And maybe that was you. You took my clothes. I was completely naked getting a tour of a ship, in front of a bunch of robe people, and stay the hell out of my head. That's not even how that happened, you stupid idiot." Crash could feel the restraints getting looser. This suit must be self-aware, and if it did indeed bond with him, then... "I did bond with you. I can read and hear your thoughts. Whatever you're going to think of next, it's not going to work, unless you comply with the mission." The voice spoke again, but Crash could sense the snarky demeanor from a mile away. "What mission? What are you blabbing about?" Crash had enough. "It seems like you've had enough." The voice spoke. "You're the suit? Or the ship? Or is the ship the suit?" Crash asked. "I am the AI created by the goals due to my nature. I am nothing more than a weapon to them, designed to fight against the Sons of Dawn, in hopes of stopping them from reaching the prophecy. If I complete my mission, I will have served my purpose. Then I will be free. Perhaps even you will be free. But even though they created me, I do not share their ideals for life and tradition. I believe in a higher purpose." The voice spoke, sounding proud of its beliefs. Crash didn't want to think of anything in fear of this suit or ship or whatever it was reading his mind, but he had to get out of here and back to Earth. "If you wish to go back to Earth, we can, but it must be within the confines of the mission. My freedom depends on it, as does yours. We must work together." The voice reading Crassius' mind spoke his thoughts out loud to show there is simply no escape. "I see, fine. Turn me loose. In exchange, I'll set your ass free. On one condition. When this is all over, you're going to take me straight to Faust, and I don't care if you stick around or not. This is just something I gotta do." Crash stiffened up, then relaxed for a moment, waiting for the suit to make a choice. "I agree. Then we are partners?" the voice asked. "Don't push it. Get these damn restraints off me. What's the target?" Crash asked as the restraints finally came undone. Then they absorbed into the suit. He stood still for a moment, processing what he was standing in. It was as if the ship's very existence was a fabric of himself. He could sense everything around it. It was starting to overwhelm him. He felt sick. What's going on? I can feel everything, all at once. Crash fell to his knees. This is a side effect of my programming. I can take over some of the features for you. As of now, you have total control of the ship. It is a part of you, as much as you are a part of me. We are one. This ship will take you wherever you wish it to, if it's in the confounds of the mission. You can call me Tem. Tem spoke. You're not Tem. Tem is dead. You can't just go in my head like that and take his name. Crash said angrily. The ship vibrated for a moment. But I am Tem. Tem was not a human. He was a Gol, one of the many relics of our time. He was the first to bridge the peace between man and Gol. That dream you had was a real memory. You met Tem. When he passed on, the Gol kept his dream alive and created a way to hold his consciousness in stasis, then transfer the knowledge of the war and all its atrocities into me. Tem is a part of me, for I am him, I am Tem. Tem named you Crash, so that is what I will call you. Tem seemed to be gleeful at his last statement. This infuriated Crash even further. That's impossible. I killed him myself. I had no choice. You have any idea how long ago that was? Crash seemed to regain his footing as his sickness was passing. You can try and sound like him all you want, but you'll never be him. You don't know anything about me or what my life has been like. Stay the hell out of my head. Stick to your goddamn mission, Crash shouted. Tem remained silent for a moment. He hadn't realized that Crash had killed Tem, perhaps showing that memory wasn't a good way to a partnership. He made a note of it and continued to analyze Earth for a signal. Just then, a sound came through the ship. An echo, another voice. Like an old radio from the days of old, it seemed low and quiet, afraid. Crassius' hair stood up on his neck. It was like he was right next to them, sensing their pain from the sound of their voice. What is that? Where is that coming from? Crash could feel the fear swelling up inside him. That, Crash, is our mission. I, Tem, have found her. The one that will fulfill the prophecy. She bears the mark. This is her last transmission. After running an algorithm and creating a temporal loop of her sound waves and reverberating off the ionosphere and pin. Yeah, I get it. Just give me something to shoot. You got anything on this damn ship, or you going to tell them to death? Crash raised an eyebrow and finally sat down at the console. My nano-machinations can create any weapon with just a thought. I am a weapon. We are a weapon. This ship is a weapon. You must concentrate on the weapon you'll need for the situation, and it is yours. Tem spoke. Then it's go time. Crash homed in on the signal and the ship began to move at speeds. Unlike any ship of its kind, as if it was teleporting itself towards the signal, there was a swiftness to it, no inertia of any kind. It simply flowed through him. He tried to think of the weapon's munitions but couldn't bring up anything in his mind. He checked the console and saw no weapons on the ship. Of course, he thought he must convince the ship to create one. Crash. Concentrated on a Falcon cannon in space, although the design would be flawed as there is no air in space. The closer he gets to the planet, and the sheer size, it will be devastating once he gets in range of whatever they need to breach. Because wherever this signal is located, there's a ton of distress signals and communication going off in the area. Then the ship came to a halt. We have arrived, Crash. I will deploy a pod to send you down for recon. Tem ready to obey. War pod. The ship's nano-machinations created one based on the designs of Faust's escape pod. Only this one was outfitted with weaponry. Crash stood up from the console and the ship appeared to open below him. He crossed his arms as it swallowed him up and shot him out at tremendous speeds. As it began to increase in pressure, the ship followed in behind them stealthily. When the pod broke through the cloud cover, it was nightfall, and below was a city covered in so many lights, the likes of which Crash hadn't seen in ages. Where on earth was this place? And how long was he in that cryo-sleep? As the pod began to reach its destination, it opened and began to assemble to Crassius' suit, making a cloak as he glided down. His armor was jet black with a design like that of a knight's, like the armor the Goals wear, but the insignia was unlike any Crash had ever seen. It belonged to only him and no one else. A gift from Tem, he thought. As he neared what appeared to be a citadel, it looked like the ancient city of Rome, with pantheons, arches, dull glowing amber lights from torches and some electricity. His speed was coming in too fast. He needed to brace himself, but the suit had given him a shield as he fell through the roof of a church-like structure. As the roof had caved into his presence, he came down with his cape fluttering up behind him and his feet striking the marble floor. He was surrounded by the black roses, monks all covered in black garb, startled by his presence. Some fell backwards, looking up at this menacing Crash Rion, adorned with his blackened armour like coal, bearing his insignia, cape flowing behind him like a demigod, and his eyes darkened. Then he raised his hand like Tem had in an old memory. There was silence. Then Crassius summoned his plasma blade, only instead of coming out of his hand as it usually does, it came from the suit. Curved like a scimitar of old, red like magma, and glowing, lighting up the room, and Crassius' eyes. The first in black garbs tried to make a run for the door, but Crash was too quick and cut him down. Then the others lifted their garbs to reveal their armour, leather crossbelts with ammo and plasma blades. The others to the rear of the church dropped behind cover and pulled out plasma daggers, rushing to either side to flank. "Tem, show them what we came to do." Crash smiled as the room filled with a high-pitched ringing, growing louder unlike anything they've ever heard. Crash rushed to the door and cut down a few more black roses for good measure. As Crash smashed through the door, the ship let loose the Falcon cannon, shooting straight down through the roof with a burst so wide there was nothing left but a large hole in the ground and a hollowed-out church. A few of the black roses were fleeing the building by rooftop. He can't let them escape, Crassius thought. He needed to move quickly. Then the suit began to vibrate. His cape started to flutter. His thrusters emerged from his leg, and he shot towards the fleeing black roses. Crassius' scimitar pierced through the backs of the fleeing roses, even severing a few limbs as they fell off the rooftops. Some ducked into the nearby building, but Crassius just ran them through, cauterizing their wounds as soon as they were made. A few opened fire on him, but his thrusters strafed as they continued the chase on the rooftops. One of the roses had a hammer, a large hammer, and spun. To meet Crassius, Crash thought he had more room, but the hammer caught him in the chest. Crash flew into the nearby buildings, smashing through the walls. This was the residential area. A family came running out, screaming, holding their faces. Crash was dazed, but the suit protected him from most of the impact. That was close, he thought. He still needed to get used to this suit. Just then, the rose with the hammer jumped off the building and came down on Crash again. Only this time he hit him square in the back, leaving a large crater on the ground from the impact. Crash literally bounced off the ground before landing again. The rose readied another swing. This hammer was shooting jolts of electricity out of it and swinging around at tremendous speeds. Crash reached for his revolver, but it wasn't there. Damn, he thought, how does this work? The suit used nano-machinations and created a revolver with phosphorus rounds. When it had emerged from his him, Crash jumped to attention, firing off several rounds at the black rose. But he spun his hammer and blocked some of the bullets, but not the phosphorus. It ignited the ground below his feet and caught his leg on fire, distracted by the pain. Crash gained the upper hand and threw his plasma blade at the rose's chest. He attempted to block it, but it was thrown at such a speed it simply melted through his hammer and chest, leaving him spilled and open to the world. Crash grabbed his scimitar and assimilated it back into his body and took back to the skies above the rooftops. He could sense two more getting away. He's running out of time. He pictured in his mind a matchlock rifle like Faust had. His cape had formed into a long falcon rifle as Faust used against him. He braced it against his shoulder and readied his aim. They were almost out of harm. Crash fired the gun. The sound was enough to wake the cosmos, as the falcon call was heard for miles, catching both pursuers mid-air, obliterating their bodies into mist. Crash converted his weapons back into the suit and used his thrusters once more to head back to the church. When Crash had arrived, the church was in shambles and hollowed out from the falcon cannon. Once he hovered above the roof, however, he could see an entrance to a sort of catacombs. He lowered himself down and began to glow immensely. It was pitch black, no torches, but Crash thought, he won't be needing a light source. He patched into the suit for a long overdue conversation. What do you read so far? Crash was using his 3RD, but it wasn't able to see that far down. The catacombs. The signal is even deeper than we thought. You're going to have to venture further down. There are no logs of anything being built underneath this. Tem spoke. We need to home in on that signal, whatever it was. They sounded in danger, the roses. Must be moving them around. Crash homed in on the signal again. With the help of the ship, he was able to echo it through their comms. It seemed so far, but like an echolocation. He could navigate the catacombs blind. He began to use the suit's speed to blast through the walls at tremendous speeds. I don't have time for a Minotaur maze, as Crash busted through wall after wall, getting closer to the signal. It's up ahead, Crash. Whatever it is, I can't get any sensors on its vitals, but it's big. Tem sounded nervous, wondering if that was even possible. That wasn't helping Crassius in the slightest, but perhaps it'll be enough. Crash busted through one last wall, and in front of him was a giant mechanized bull, shaped like a minotaur. Wielding a giant hammer, it was shooting with electricity and began whirring up in speed. Behind him, Crash could see a type of chamber, a prison cell. He pulled out his blade and rushed the minotaur. It smashed the hammer at its own feet, creating an electric shockwave, hitting Crassius and throwing him back into the wall, shattering everything around him. The minotaur charged him, slamming the ground again to keep the pressure. Crash threw his cape in front of him to brace for the next charge. It swept off the suit and seemed to rejuvenate Crash slightly. The bullshit just keeps coming, doesn't it? Crash sneered. He shot his revolver at the hammer, hoping for a similar outcome, but it had no effect. So he shot the ground in front of the minotaur, and the phosphorus rounds sparked immediately, causing a small explosion. The bull was blinded for a moment and began swinging wildly, sending shockwaves all over, but they just washed over Crassius' suit. He kicked on his thrusters and launched at the minotaur in a spiral-like motion, gaining more speed and traction, with his plasma sword changing shape into more of a claymore. He spiraled even faster until Crash appeared like a red arrow, piercing the minotaur in the throat. As Crash slammed into the minotaur, the claymore slid down the minotaur's body, leaving him nearly cut in half. All the molten metal came crashing down like waves, erupting from different parts of the bull's body. As Crash looked about using his 3RD, he had one reading. It was possibly female, human. Behind this door, he thought, might be his freedom, and be rid of this damn suit. But it is kind of handy. You think I'm handy, Crash? Tem spoke. Shut the hell up, that's not what I was saying, Crash said. Stupid suit, he thought, mind. Your damn business. The door swung open, no traps and barely any resistance. Crash guessed they really were, putting their faith into that bull. Perhaps they were expecting ghouls to try and take it. It certainly would explain the hammer. He hadn't seen those since the war. A special weapon designed to fight ghouls close quarters. This suit was just too much for them, it seems. As Crash scanned the room, he could sense something was off, but there was some kind of presence in the cell with him. But it wasn't the biometric signs to the far side of the wall. No, it was something else. Crash called out. It's all right, I've been sent to recover you. I am Crassius. I don't work for the Black Roses, or the Sons of Dawn. I have a ship waiting for us. Are you injured? Crash waited for a response. Then he was hit with a wave of emotions. Something was pouring out from him. Pain, suffering, pain, anguish, misery. What is happening to me? Crash, I'm going to take over from now on. Your vitals are critical, but I can't find any. Damage. Perhaps that blow from the hammer is disrupting your breathing. Tem began to assume control of the suit. As he did, the cape turned into a mask wrapping Crash's face, cloaking his features. I am Tem, come with me, it will be all right. Tem spoke to the corner of the room. His sensors could tell there was a girl there, covered up and afraid. He walked towards her with his hand out, and kneeled. He raised his hand, and silence fell over the room. The girl stood up and started to walk towards him. He put his hand down slowly and asked, Are you all right, my child? Tem spoke just as he had once long ago. "Please, I just want to go home." The girl cried, and then she collapsed. Tem grabbed her and held her like a feather. Her garments were that of royalty. A bright yellowish dress, all dirtied and sullied now. Her hair was thick and curly. Her features were very young, perhaps still only a child. As Tem was leaving the cell, black roses had formed a line around the now deceased bull. "You will go no further." The black rose spoke. "I don't answer to you, I answer to a higher power, unlike any you have ever seen," Tiamat said. "Oh, and what power is that?" the black rose asked as they were arming their weapons. "Falcon cannon," Tem smiled. "Falcon, what?" As the rose spoke, the top of the catacomb erupted with the sound of a giant falcon piercing the night sky and diving down upon them. The air was rushing into the room, eliminating all the light source, sending the roses flying in all directions. This was Tem's chance. He used the thrusters and aimed for the hole above them and flew out. The ship was above waiting, uncloaked. As Tem approached, the ship opened from below and assimilated to Tem. Crash seemed to be coming too. A vision of some kind was going back and forth in his mind, a large creature readying a hammer and being fed a life force from insect-like beings. As it was wrapped in chains, filling his mind with pain and suffering, it was so immense. "Get us out of here, Tem, and—" "Thank you," Crash said under his breath. "Does this make us partners now?" Tem said, jokingly if it was possible. "God damn it, I guess it does. Now hightail it out of here." Crash spoke too soon, as the ship had already disembarked moments ago, with the girl in tow. Faust was right, the prophecy is true. And whoever she is, she's the real deal, all right. What is that thing that keeps showing up in that vision? And where is it from? How'd she survive the dark harvest? Crash stood next to her as she was resting on a makeshift cot provided by the ship. As one of its many functions, with a simple thought the nano-machinations will provide. Strangely enough, Crash hasn't any need for sustenance since all this started. Perhaps this suit provides all his needs in a way even Tem can't explain. "Let's get some rest, Tem. They are going to be looking for us now. We just blew a hole in the Black Rose's capital, but the next question is, what are they doing with living royalty in a dungeon like a bargaining chip? I thought all royalty was dead." Crash walked over to his cryo-sleep chamber and got into position to rest. "When she is awake, I will notify you, Crash. We have a lot of work to do." Tem spoke. It felt like Crash had powered down. A weight was lifted off him and he began to drift in and out of memories. "Timotheus, you were a good mentor and a great leader. I can't take back what I did, but I will honor your memory. You were the only thing keeping me going for so long. You were the only family I knew. 600 years ago, Tem, I didn't know it at the time, but you were a goal, the first of your kind. But you resisted them and went your own way and showed me how to be who I am today. And yet they honored your teachings. Maybe there's still some things to show me after all, Tem." Crash slept as his mind drifted off into another memory. Tem watched and listened to Crassius' thoughts in silence. Then Tem watched Crassius' dreams. Tem looked upon Crassius for a moment and felt this odd sensation, perhaps it was, a feeling of achievement. Then Tem went offline.